Let's take out our notebooks, our pencils, our reference table, and the Unit 6 packet. All right, so what we're going to do today is continue with Unit 6 and talk about Newton's first law of motion. Your assignment tonight is just to study. We'll finish it tomorrow on Newton's first law, and hopefully you'll have some time in class where you can work on the written assignment so you don't have a written assignment over the Thanksgiving recess. It would just be studying, so that way you'd be ready for the quiz on Newton's first law of motion on Monday, December 1st, when you come back from Thanksgiving. All right, so let's get into Newton's first law. Newton's first law of motion is also called the law of inertia, and it is also called the law of equilibrium. That's not on the slide, but we're going to hear about that word soon. So we're going to talk about his first law of motion, which is also called the law of inertia, and it's also called the law of equilibrium. So this law is describing what inertia is, and it talks about when objects are in equilibrium, how they will move. So what I'll ask you to do on the quiz on Monday, December 1st, is I'm going to ask you to define, of course, the term force. For the entire rest of the year, you need to know what is meant by a force. The entire rest of the course is about force. Then you'll have to state Newton's first law, which that's middle school level. Your physical science teachers back in middle school had you do that. We're going to go beyond that, so that way you'll now have to explain what it means. What does his law state, and what does it mean? Then I'll have you do a little more definition here. What is meant by inertia? What is meant by mass? And how are they related? And then I'll ask you to explain what the differences are between an object which is experiencing a net force versus objects which are experiencing equilibrium. So we'll define those terms as well. So to quickly review what we talked about in section A, remember that a force is any push or pull on an object because of how that object is interacting with other things. And we use a capital F to represent all the forces. It's a derived unit called a Newton, which is equivalent to a kilogram times a meter per second squared, and all forces are vectors, so we'll be drawing them with arrows. Now, what does Newton's first law state? It says that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, And an object that's in motion tends to stay in motion. And it will move with a constant speed in a straight line unless it's being acted upon by something called an unbalanced force. So the middle school piece of this is an object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object that's moving keeps moving. That's what you learned in middle school. Now you have to go beyond that to explain what this means. What does this mean? Remember, what we're doing now is we're trying to explain why objects are moving the way they are. Okay, in units 2, 3, 4, and 5, we talked about how an object was moving. Now that we understand, I think, how an object moves, we want to be able to explain why it's doing what it's doing. And according to Newton's first law, he's saying that when the forces acted on you are not unbalanced, that you'll stay at rest or you'll keep moving at a constant speed in a straight line. You'll do one of two things. Which of those two things will depend on what you were doing when the force is balanced out on you. If it's not unbalanced, it's balanced. Okay. So before we go into any more detail with this, let's try to describe what is meant by an unbalanced force. And I'm going to help you do that with some pictures, okay? So let's get some of these pictures in our notes. Let's say I have an object here, which is being pulled with a force of 5 newtons to the right, but it is also being pulled with a force of 5 newtons to the left. When you look at those, you notice that those amounts are the same and they're in opposite directions. This is what we mean by a balanced force or balanced forces. There are multiple forces and they balance out. We have the same amount in opposite directions. The same thing would be true if I pulled this box up and to the right with 5 newtons of force and somebody else was pulling it down and to the left with 5 newtons of force. Do you see how I have equal amounts in opposing directions? This is what we would call balanced forces. And this is what is described in Newton's first law of motion. Newton tells us that when the forces on something are balanced out, if it's at rest, it stays at rest. If they're not balanced, if they're balanced and you're moving, you'll keep moving with a constant speed in a straight line. When we talk about forces being unbalanced, it would look something like this. Do you see how there's nothing on that picture to oppose 5 newtons pulling down on this box? This is what is meant by unbalanced forces. We can see that we don't have equal amounts in opposite directions. So on this picture, that 5 Newton force is an unbalanced force because there's nothing there to balance it. So this is what is meant by an unbalanced force. So Newton says in the first law that when you do not have an unbalanced force, you're going to keep doing what you're doing. Whatever it is you're doing in terms of your motion, you're going to keep doing that. So when we say that your motion isn't changing, remember that means you're not accelerating. So Newton's first law, if I were to try to explain this with kind of a pictorial representation, the key here is that his first law is really describing what you do when the forces on you balance out. When the forces on you balance out, you're doing one of two things. You're either following the path on the left or the path on the right. If you're following the path on the left, it's because you started off not moving. Your velocity was 0 meters per second. You're at rest. And when he says you stay at rest, that means you're not accelerating. Your acceleration is 0 meters per second squared. If you were moving and the forces on you were balanced, then your acceleration will still be 0, which means you move with a constant velocity. And when we say you have a constant velocity, that means not only is your speed the same, you're on cruise control, but you're also not changing the direction of your steering wheel. You're traveling in a straight line. Constant speed in a straight line. So you're going to do one of those two things. When the forces on you balance out. So if I were to try to say this with one thing that's universal for everything that has balanced forces, there's no acceleration. When there are balanced forces, there's no acceleration. I can't tell you in one statement how you're moving. All I can do is tell you that you're not going to accelerate. Whatever it is you were doing, you don't all of a sudden change that motion. You just don't accelerate when the forces on you are balanced. Okay. Everyone has that flow chart kind of in their notes to help them understand the two possible scenarios that occur with Newton's first law. Okay. Because this is all conceptual and you need to be able to explain it. And I'm trying to break it down as simply as I can because it will get more complicated. If we don't understand the simple piece, trying to understand the more complicated piece won't happen. Okay. May I go on? All right. So let's look at some examples. What does this really mean? It means that when the forces on you are balanced out, your state of motion is going to be maintained. When the forces on you balance out, whatever you're doing, you're going to keep doing. So if you're at rest, then you're going to stay with a 0 velocity. If you're moving in the positive direction at 5 meters per second and the forces on you are balanced out, you're going to keep moving at 5 meters per second in the positive direction. It also means if you're traveling at 2 meters per second to the left and the forces on you are balanced out, you're going to keep moving at 2 meters per second to the left. That doesn't change. If it changes, then the forces are not balanced. So when the forces on you are balanced, the object will just keep doing what it's doing in terms of its velocity. So this brings us to an idea that objects will try to resist a change in their motion. They try to resist accelerations. Objects want to keep doing what they're doing, in other words. And that's true of human nature as well. Most people I know don't like to change. They'll only change if they are absolutely forced to change. That's true of objects' motion as well. We want to keep doing what we're doing. Okay, so this idea of objects resisting change to motion is given a fancy term in physics. It's called inertia. Inertia. Inertia refers to the tendency of objects to resist changes in motion. Remember that a change in motion is also called an acceleration. When your motion changes, you are accelerating, whether you're speeding up, slowing down, or changing direction. So if you resist an acceleration, that's because you have mass. Your inertia, your resistance to change in motion, is dependent on your mass only. Doesn't depend on anything else. Just how massive you are. So that means the more mass you have, the more inertia you have, the more likely you are to resist an acceleration. The less mass you have, the less inertia you have, the easier it is for you to accelerate. So here we are throwing around this word mass. And we haven't really defined what mass is ever in this course. You probably did in chemistry, but not in physics. So we need to take a little detour and define what we mean by mass. Because mass, your mass, will determine how much inertia you have, how likely you are to resist changing your motion when something pushes you. So what is your mass? What is mass? It's just how much matter is in an object. Now, when we say how much matter is in an object, we're referring to like how many molecules there are in the object. How many atoms and molecules are in this? We're not talking about how closely packed those atoms are. That would be density. We're talking about just how much stuff is inside of something. That's matter. And in the metric system, all masses are measured in a unit called the kilogram. The kilogram, which we abbreviate as lowercase kg. Now, you do have your reference table out, right? We have some things we're going to check off on page 6 related to this. So let's go to page 6. And in the right-hand column, let's find the symbol that we use for mass. Here it is, that lowercase m. Let's check that off. Lowercase m stands for the mass of an object. And as we said, that is going to be measured in kg, kilogram, in the metric system. Now, remember that the metric system is used all over the world except in the United States, Myanmar, and Liberia. So mass is a pretty important thing, and it's important for you to know your mass, especially if you ever plan to travel outside of the United States. Anyone here ever plan to go outside the United States? Canada, Mexico, some of the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, okay, anywhere. India, anywhere you go, they're going to be using kilograms for your masses, which means if you get sick, you better know what your mass is in kilograms because the hospital is going to want to know that. You tell them your weight in pounds, and they're going to be like, huh? Ignorant American. What the heck? You need to know your mass in kilograms, okay? So I need you to be also cautious of this. This is what our entire lesson on Monday or tomorrow is going to be about. No, it's Monday. Mass and weight in the United States are often interchanged. They are not the same things. So I need you to be very careful with the words you use. I'll give you a little bit of a break early on, but I have to correct you whenever you misuse the term weight or mass. Mass refers to how much stuff is inside of you. Your weight is referring to the earth pulling on you because you have mass. So they are related, but they don't mean the same things. They're not even measured in the same units. Mass is in kilograms. Weights in the metric system are newtons. In the English system, they're pounds. In the English system, mass is in a unit called the slug. Have you ever heard of how many slugs you are? Somebody says you're a slug, they usually mean you're kind of slow. You're lazy. That's what they're talking about. All right, that's your mass. I guess in a way, yeah, a slug is slow. The more slugs you have in you, not insects, the more slugs you have, the harder it is to get you to move, the more inertia you have. The same, but we do it in kilograms. It's a much nicer unit, the kilogram. So before I go to my document camera, let's talk about, you remember for your quarter exam, I was asking you like approximate sizes or lengths of things. Okay. We do this with masses too. What's the approximate mass of a chicken egg? What is the approximate mass of a car? Objects that you should have some familiarity with. All right. And you're not going to stick all of these on triple beam balances throughout the year to get these masses. I'm going to give you some things and we're going to work with these masses all year long. And I want you to pay attention. Whatever we're massing, pay attention to what that number is, because that will help you determine relative sizes of other things. So here are some common things that you may have heard of before, like a penny. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to change that to a nickel soon because pennies are they're being taken out of circulation this week. They are no longer being printed, which means if you have them, you should hoard them because someday you will be a millionaire with those pennies because we're not printing them anymore. They're not being minted anymore.
Why? Well, they are kind of useless. Well,
that is a whole political discussion, and I am not going there. All right. This is somebody's brainchild that, yes, I'm just not going there. Pennies. If you have a penny, it's about 3 grams. 3 grams we make that kilograms is 0.003 kilograms. So what is 1 gram? An object you can think of that's 1 gram is a paper clip. A paper clip is 1 gram. Okay? A paper clip is 1 gram. So when we ask you for masses of things, you kind of have to ask yourself, how many paper clips do I have? If I have 1,000 paper clips, that's a kilogram. Kilo means 1,000. This is also great information in case any of you ever plan to go into the drug business, the drug trade, whether it's legal or illegal. Okay, when they get confiscated, they always talk about, oh, the police got 1 kilo of this, 2 kilos of that, 5 kilos of crack cocaine. Oh my God. Now you'll at least know what is meant by a kilo. A kilo means a kilogram. Okay. And if you go into pharmacy, which is also the drug business, if you're going to be a pharmacist, that's the drug business. Could be legal, could be illegal, depending on if it's prescribed for someone or not. Look at your tablets or your capsules that you're taking. Your vitamins all have amounts in grams, whether it be milligrams or micrograms. It's all grams. It's all metric. Okay. A textbook is about 2 kilograms. A bicycle is about 15 kilograms. Your car, if you're dealing with like a 4-door sedan, they're about 2,000 kilograms. That's also called a metric ton. Have you heard of a ton before? A ton is a car. That's 2,000 kilograms. A 747 jetliner is about 120,000 kilograms. And if we're talking about a super tanker, which goes across like the Atlantic Ocean, these are filled with all kinds of cargo bins. 150 million kilograms. Now, to give you an idea of what 1 kilogram is, we have metric masses that we use in our labs a lot. So what I'm going to start to do is pass a kilogram around so you can get a feel for exactly how heavy, how much matter is in this thing. Please be careful and do not drop it on the floor. If I haven't told you before, these are asbestos tiles. And if you drop it and crack a tile, we're all up a creek. Okay, we don't want to be ejected from this classroom for the next month because it will take them that long to come in and remove the asbestos broken tile from the classroom. That was my office. One of the tiles in our office broke this summer, and I had no office for a month, the first month of school. And I was just like, just great. More carcinogens around me. Like I don't have enough cancer to deal with, right? So anyways, just feel it. feel what a kilogram
So that's
is.
1,000 paper clips.
That's 1,000 paper clips right there. Okay. Now let's talk about you. Because if you get sick and you go to a hospital, you're going to want to know how many kilograms you are, roughly, right? Okay. Here's a conversion factor that is often very useful. A kilogram is about 2.2 pounds. A kilogram, it's actually 2.205 pounds, 2.2 pounds. So if you want to take a minute later and figure out how many kilograms that means you are, that would be a good thing to do, just so you have a rough idea of how many kilograms you are. So if, God forbid, you get sick somewhere overseas, you know what to do. Okay. All right. So let's keep going here. Let's now see. This is all conceptual understanding. Can you explain each of these situations in terms of Newton's first law? So I'm going to describe something that you probably have seen or personally experienced before. I want you to tell me how Newton's first law is coming into play with this. Why is the description true in terms of Newton's first law? So the first scenario you may have experienced before is blood rushing from your head to your feet in an elevator if it stops abruptly. Have you ever felt like the blood just kind of left your head and you get a little dizzy or faint? You haven't felt that? Okay, try that sometime. Go in an elevator. The one at Colony Center is too slow. Where can you go to a good elevator that's publicly available? If you go down to the Empire State Plaza, the towers that are there, I think you can go into those. The Corning Towers, the tall one at the Empire State Plaza, I think that's 50 stories tall.
Would it work with, like, you know, like the thing where like they shoot you up and then like you like free fall back down?
No, because that's free fall, but you want to stop abruptly?
Or like you stop at the top.
No, but this is coming down. You're in a
Oh.
descending elevator. The elevator is going down and it stops all of a sudden.
Oh my god, no.
Okay. So let's say we're on the second floor, the elevator's coming down, and all of a sudden it just stops. You're going to feel a little off. That's because the blood rushed from your head to your feet. Why does that happen? Talk to me about that in terms of Newton's first law. Anyone want to try it? You want me to give you an example of what I'm looking for? Because maybe you don't understand what this means.
Like the blood cells are going to keep moving because there's something.
Because they were in motion. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. The blood was moving. It wants to keep moving. Newton's first law says an object in motion wants to keep moving. So even though your body stopped, the blood is separate. I mean, that's why if you get cut, blood keeps coming out separate from you. Your body stopped, the elevator stopped, but your blood didn't. An object in motion wants to keep moving. Newton's first law. That explains why you experience that. That's what I'm looking for. I want you to tell me how Newton's first law can explain what we just observed. Second scenario, the head of a hammer can be tightened onto a wood handle if you bang the bottom of the handle against a hard surface. This is what I mean. Here's like a little diagram. The head is different, separate from the handle. So if I bring this down, this gets loose, I can just boom, boom, boom onto a desk several times, and this will get tightened onto that. Why? Tell me why that would happen in terms of Newton's first law. Come on, somebody's got to try it. Otherwise, I'm going to make you all cluck like chickens later because you're all chicken.
I tried it.
You did try one, so Morgan's off the hook. Everybody else, get ready to start squawking like chickens if you're too afraid.
When the hammer is hit onto the table, the motion of it gets the head of the hammer in motion, and then it just wants to keep going because it's in motion.
Because it was moving. As it was coming down to the table, it was in motion. So an object in motion wants to keep moving. The bottom stopped, the top didn't. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. All right, so Caroline's off the hook. The rest of you, bark, Yep. I am officially nuts. Number 3, I know you've all done this before. To dislodge ketchup from the bottom of a ketchup bottle, you often turn the bottle upside down and you thrust it downward at a high speed and then abruptly halt the bottle. To try to get that ketchup out onto your fries. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so why would that work according to Newton's first law? Why do the laws of physics say that would work? And an object in motion? Thank you. Gianni's off the hook. All right, only 3 of you. I'm keeping track. You're all going to be clucking like chickens, and I am going to get my video camera out. This will be fun. All right. Number 4. Put the fear in you. Okay. You don't want to have to squawk like a chicken? Headrests are placed in cars to prevent a whiplash injury during a rear end collision. Manure.
Because when a car like brakes, the person's still moving, so it prevents like them hitting back.
That is not a rear end collision. Do you understand what is meant by a rear end collision?
Or like the car. The car.
So your car is at rest when it's hit. Somebody is hitting you from behind. They're like tailgating you. Not paying attention. You're stopped at a stop sign or a stoplight, and all of a sudden somebody comes up and bam, hits you from behind. How does the headrest prevent you from getting a whiplash injury? Do you know what whiplash is? Really? You've probably heard of it. Okay, let me explain. And here I gotta get into some gory anatomy stuff.
Oh,
You know that concussion that's our next example. Let's talk about your spine. You know where your spine is, right? Okay, you know you have vertebrae in your spine?
Yeah.
Okay, do you know what's in between the vertebrae?
Yeah.
Discs. And a disc is basically a cushion that is filled with fluid. Okay. Your spine starts all the way at the bottom of your tailbone, your butt, and goes all the way up to your brain. It connects to your brain stem. Okay, so let's talk about the vertebrae that's here in your neck. Whiplash occurs in your neck. When you are hit from behind, let's see if I can't really demonstrate it, but let's use this as my driver's seat in the car. Does my seat have a headrest right now?
No.
Okay, so I want you to look at this for a minute. No headrests behind me. Okay, let's say I'm just sitting at the light and all of a sudden somebody comes up and smashes into my back end because they are not paying attention to what they're doing. When they hit me, the car goes forward and my seat is bolted to the car. So the seat will go forward with the car. But is my entire body going to go forward? No, because only the parts from my shoulder down are going to go forward because there's nothing behind my head. So my head is at rest and it wants to stay at rest. But my shoulders go forward, my head stays where it was, and it happens like that. It looks like your head snaps back, but that's not what it is. Your neck snaps forward and your head stays where it is because it's at rest. Now, when that happens and all these vertebrae that are in your neck, they get squished like that fast. Guess what happens to all the fluid in those discs? Pops out. You're not going to hear it. It just, if they get flattened like a pancake. And then you've got bone on bone in your neck.
Oh.
That's whiplash. That hurts. It hurts. and it is not repairable. Okay, so once that's gone, you have like a permanent injury in your neck that you will be dealing with your whole life. You're going to have physical therapy. They're going to send you to an orthopedic doctor. They're going to send you to a chiropractor, maybe to try to stretch you and get a little more space. If it gets really bad, they will do surgery to fuse those vertebrae together. So that way they're not trying to rub against each other. Bone on bone rubbing.
Exactly. No, that's
Then you always have to do this. You want to see something over there, you can't turn your head. That's not cool. All right. It hurts. That's why you see people who've had this type of injury, they have these big like collars around them that they're wearing to try to help. Okay. So how does a headrest prevent that? Talk to me about practically speaking. How would a headrest prevent that injury? What does a headrest do?
It stops your head from going.
No.
Or
Manure.
Since the seat's going forward, it keeps you going forward.
Because now the seat is
We know that's connected to
because it's the back of my seat is now
elevator.
taller.
Oh,
It's taller. It goes up behind my head. So now my head will have to move forward with my body. Okay. Now, how many of you have your license? How many of you hope to have your license in the next year or so? Okay. Did you know, as the driver of a vehicle, that you are 100% responsible for the safety of every person in your car? Okay. I don't care if you're driving around your mom. If you're the driver, you are responsible for your mother. Your mom doesn't want to wear her seatbelt or adjust her headrest and she gets injured. Guess whose fault it is? Yours.
you're liable.
You are, as the driver. Okay. You're driving a friend and you're not going to tell them to adjust their headrest and you get in an accident. Guess who's going to get sued besides the person who hit you? You, because you're the driver of the car and you were driving without making sure your passengers were making sure they were following all proper safety precautions. One of the safety precautions you have to think about is this headrest. Nobody talks to you about the headrest. I think about it now because my daughter wants to be driving soon. Okay. She is taller than I am. So if she gets in the driver's seat, the headrest will not be behind her head. It won't. So when she gets in the driver's seat, she has to make sure she adjusts it up. That's one of the things I'm going to say. Listen, you got to do. Oh, come on, Mom. No, just do it. Otherwise, give me the keys. Otherwise, you're not learning and you're not driving. Okay. You got to put the headrest behind your head. And then when you go, make sure everybody's headrest is behind their head. Okay. That way, if you, God forbid, get into this kind of an accident, no one gets hurt that way. Okay. Now, here's the one that's a little more gory. What motion would the passengers in a car undergo if they were not wearing seatbelts and the car were brought to a sudden and abrupt halt by a collision with a wall or a telephone pole or a tree? Let's also say that the car doesn't have an airbag. Anson?
They fly out the car.
No, they're not going to fly out of the car.
The windshield.
And they're going to go through it. How? How are they going to go through the windshield? Head first. Their brain, their skull is going to try to go through that glass. Okay. Tell me why that would happen. First of all, in terms of Newton's laws, Braden.
Well, the car was in motion, so then you're in motion, and then when it abruptly stops, you have to stay in motion, so that could push you down.
Yeah, you're not getting pushed. You're just continuing to
Or you
go.
continue.
You just continue to go. Your car stopped, but you're not going to. Now, let me tell you a personal situation here. I have lots of cousins. My mom has had a brother who passed away in 2020 at the age of 95, so don't feel too sad. Okay, and then she has a sister who's 2 years younger than her, my Aunt Jackie. She has 3 children of her own. My cousin Jonathan is the middle child. And he is about 9 years younger than me. When Jonathan was, I want to say 21, but he wasn't. He must have been like 19. He was going to school at Hudson Valley to get his associate's degree, so that way he could become a computer repair person. And he had a part-time job. He was working at the Price Chopper on the corner of Albany, Shaker, and Osborne Road. You know what I'm talking about? The Price Chopper's still there in that little plaza where Laney's is? Okay. They lived in Latham. My aunt still lives in Latham. And he was going to work. He was late for work. He was supposed to be there at 7. He was not there. He was en route, coming off the Northway at exit 4 from Latham. They live off exit 6. Coming down, and back when this occurred, exits 4 and 5 were like one. You would get on the Northway at exit 5, and that would be the exit 4 off ramp. They have since changed it. They did some construction about 10 years ago to fix that. But anyway, he was coming off exit 4, going too fast, not wearing his seatbelt, and he had a 2-seater beater sports car. Too fast, trying to navigate a turn. So what did his car do? It went straight off the exit ramp into a tree, head first. So what did Jonathan do? Head first through the windshield, got his head stuck in the windshield. Now that area on the other side of the trees is the Colony Police Department on Old Wolf Road. Do you know where I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. They could see the whole thing. Couldn't do a darn thing about it because the Northway is a state highway. Colony Police has no jurisdiction there. They had to call the state police, which is not far. It was in Latham. They got there, extricated him from the vehicle with the jaws of life, and there was a helicopter who brought him to Albany Med. Through this whole process, his brain began to swell. Your brain doesn't have much room to swell. It's basically like a really bad concussion. A concussion is a bone bruise or a brain bruise. Your brain jostled around inside the bone. If your brain begins to swell like happens in this kind of an accident, your blood pressure goes up. You're in danger of stroking out like that. He's like 19 years old. They get him there, and what do they do to start relieving the pressure in his brain? Start drilling holes in his skull, and then they cut the top of his skull off. Put it in a preservative. He was in a medically induced coma in the ICU at Albany Med for 6 months until his brain swelling started to come down. And once it came down, they took him out of the coma. Could not talk, could not walk, didn't know how to lift a fork. I will tell you the rest of this story tomorrow. He did survive, but it's not good. Take care. I'll see you.